As an eldritch cosmic horror born from galactic cataclysms and bent on conquest, that arguably makes Space Godzilla have far more in common with a Kirby villain than your typical kaiju. As much as people may mock the concept of a Space Godzilla, he has always been one of my favorites. And with all of the Space Godzilla baiting that Legendary has been doing with the lead up to Supernova, as much as I do think that is a red herring, far be it from me to miss out on a chance to gush about a favorite kaiju, or an overthought analysis, which is probably wrong. Hello everyone, I'm Max Allo, your American Allosaurus. And today we're talking about Godzilla's twisted crystalline alien clone, Space Godzilla. He's fairly unique among most of the kaiju given that he is one that possesses a genuine malice. Most kaiju tend to be either instinctively aggressive and not higher thought, they are simply territorial rivals with other kaiju, or they are the pawns of aliens aiming to use them as organic weapons. Something that only the original incarnation of King Ghidorah, Destroya, and Space Godzilla possessed. Oh yeah, and I guess Scar King also exists. We should have had more screen time. And speaking of screen time, if you want us to have more screen time, don't forget to comment your thoughts below, leave a like on the video, and subscribe for more. When it comes to Toho's classics, especially King Ghidorah, Space Godzilla bears a lot of similarities. They are both megalomaniacal, roving galaxy conquerors. In fact, the original Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla was a retooled version of a script that was about King Ghidorah. The only difference being between him and King Ghidorah is he actually lacks the omnicidal tendencies that King Ghidorah and Destroya possesses, which is something that actually makes him exactly what the MonsterVerse needs. And much like the other two, he is an intelligent destroyer. But a unique trait among him is that he does not seek to just dominate. He seeks to actually torment Godzilla personally. He takes little Godzilla as a prisoner following his victory on Boz Island. In fact, he even used little Godzilla to lure Godzilla into more or less not quite an ambush, but into a fight on his terms, giving him the clear, distinct advantage. This is because Space Godzilla understood Godzilla was the only and largest obstacle standing in his way of galactic conquest. It also shows that he actively seeks to exploit Godzilla's weaknesses beyond simply combat. Even during the final battle in Fukuoka, Space Godzilla focuses far more heavily on combating Godzilla than he does on Moguera. Not to say that he ignores Moguera, but most of his combat directed towards Moguera is simply either an afterthought and only actually retaliates against Moguera after Moguera destroys his shoulder crystals, instead preferring to face down Godzilla continuously. And once again, in contrast to both Destroya and King Ghidorah, who both were omnicidal maniacs, Space Godzilla actually seems content to allow humanity to exist, as his goal is conquest. There is nothing to be gained in ruling over a planet where there is no life but himself. When he arrives in Fukuoka, where his tower is, he begins setting up a defensive perimeter around it so that no one can destroy the tower he is utilizing in order to generate most of his power, and having it be a defensive fortification against the very clearly going to come back Godzilla who will be coming to retaliate. However, despite the fact that he does understand Godzilla is his biggest threat, and perhaps because of his, not without good reason, massive ego and overconfidence in his own power, this does prove to be his undoing. After all, he does possess all of Godzilla's own powers in addition to flying, fast and light travel, telekinesis, barrier creation, and energy absorption. He also had bested both Godzilla and Moguera on individual terms prior. And while on Boz Island he actually was straightforward battling, taking the fight seriously, after that when it came to the fight in Fukuoka, he seems to be almost toying with Godzilla and drawing the fight out for personal amusement. Again, possibly stemming from the fact that he does not perceive Godzilla as being as large of a threat as he was before. or at least mistakenly having believed Godzilla possessed as large of a threat. Once again, he largely seems to disregard Mogira until they both destroy the tower and destroy his crystals, at which point Space Godzilla is left in almost no position to continue fighting, being drained of most of his energy. This almost toying with Godzilla and seeming disregard of Mogira is what opened him up to his final defeat, being that he has no capabilities in upfront melee combat. His build is simply too large and too heavy to be able to engage in a claw-to-claw combat in the same way Godzilla can. Heck, Space Godzilla is unable to even stand up after being knocked down. And while Godzilla does not possess the same energy absorption capabilities Space Godzilla does have, he is able to directly siphon energy off of Space Godzilla, further depleting his energy reserves and allowing him to unleash a red spiral atomic ray which vaporizes and destroys Space Godzilla. It's things like that which make him the most interesting of all Godzilla's evil counterparts, as he seems to want to make the King of the Monsters title a literal one, establishing himself as the dominant power of Earth, while Godzilla's was always more of a metaphorical title. Though it is worth noting that many other monsters share far more similarities to Godzilla in regards to their origin and into thematics. Space Godzilla, his similarities really begin and end at the name and being a genetic source. And thankfully he dodges the most typical pitfalls of the evil clone trope. He displays absolutely none of the clone angst, and his goal is to destroy Godzilla out of simple pragmatism. It's impressive how, despite being derived from King Ghidorah, the two are still very distinct characters, despite those overwhelming similarities, and it's very easy to identify the differences between them. It's what makes him such a strong contender for a MonsterVerse reinvention. I do, however, see two major issues with him being in Supernova. The biggest one of those being he would be the third Godzilla copycat we have had in the Godzilla Kong saga. Mechagodzilla, well, duh, and in New Empire, Shimo was specifically designed to be an ice Godzilla. And even though Scar King is the main villain of the movie, most of the movie actually focused on Shimo as the main antagonist. And then, hypothetically, if Supernova is to have Space Godzilla, would we really want to see a third Godzilla look-alike fighting? One of the biggest criticisms of movies, particularly things like superhero and kaiju films, is when the hero and the villain have the same powers, or they are a physical similarity mirror of one another. See things like Man of Steel, Iron Man 2, Black Panther, The Incredible Hulk, even Godzilla Kong the New Empire itself, and there are definitely times where, in story, this actually works. See something like Logan. But those are far less frequently than the time that it is done just to make things easier, when it's just slapped in and comes off as being lazy. Yes, we have had a number of Godzilla copycat enemies throughout the Godzilla series. However, they are often very heavily dispersed between several gaps between them, of other much more creative and inventive monsters. And despite the box office success of Godzilla Kong the New Empire, it is very clear that the audience was not really the most pleased with just having Godzilla and Kong fight Yogurt Frozilla and King Lang Kong. There's a lot of core Godzilla fans, and we'd probably be okay with Space Godzilla returning, but most normies, I don't think they would be, because they'd be tired of seeing another Godzilla clone fighting Godzilla. Heck, people are already starting to get tired of the Kong Godzilla tag team as is. Appealing to the more core Godzilla fan demographic can work with a much more modestly budgeted 15 million movie like Godzilla Minus One. But for a much larger budget, in fact something that is 10 times that, like what Godzilla Kong the New Empire was, you can't solely rely on the core Godzilla fans and hopefully some of the normies, After all, the market that is China is now completely excised, more or less, from Hollywood. And the second, and arguably more major problem, is they will need to address Godzilla, Mothra, Shimo, and Kong. You have 3 mega powerful boss monsters, and then there is Kong. So unless they somehow write out both Mothra and Shimo, which makes no sense given they are trying to correct the Wingard problem and go back to a more continuity focus, since it would make no sense as Mothra is Godzilla's right hand and Shimo is Kong's war mount, it would be almost impossible to have a convincing 1v4. Unless they go the route of Space Godzilla kills Shimo and or Mothra. And they already said that the movie is going to be more focused on Godzilla, and something like that would eat into it more heavily. Unless they focus on Godzilla's reaction to Mothra being dead again, but they kind of already did that with Godzilla King of the Monsters. As well as it would need to convincingly portray Kong is able to keep up with and fight him, when it took so much more than that to have Godzilla equal Shimo in a fight. So then that's even stronger than Shimo. Again, it's hard to make that convincing. Now again, having multiple enemies would solve this, as the aforementioned needing to have someone that can convincingly take on Kong for a final fight could result in the Godzilla having to bodyguard Kong scenario, which is one of the many sins of the new Empire. Godzilla's role in that entire movie is simply bodyguarding Kong. Now, assuming, say, Space Godzilla brings in reinforcements, we'd then bring the total kaiju tally up to a minimum of 6 monsters, which, while it would be awesome to see, is still a bit of a lopsided fight, and is a lot to set up and deal with in one movie, while again trying to maintain a focus on Godzilla. Short of once again offing Shimo and or Mothra, it seems like it's a difficult circle to square, and yes, a large part of this is due to the damage Wingard has done. And personally, I do hope Shimo gets offed. She is a large problem, and her being removed would solve a great many of them. But, once again, I do think that this is Legendary red herring us, as much as I would like to see Space Godzilla return. But that is really all for today, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to subscribe for more, leave your thoughts in the comments below, leave a like on the video, and, I've been Maxello. What are your thoughts on Space Godzilla? Do you like him? Do you hate him? What do you think of my thoughts on possibly him returning or not returning in the MonsterVerse for Supernova? And who do you think, if they are going to go with the classic Toho monster for Supernova, what they will be doing, or do you think they'll be going with a new original monster? Anyway, see you guys next time. Long live the Kaiju King.